Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Very much appreciate the opportunity to come and speak here today, so thank you for that. My name's Simon Bourne. I'm the CTO of ITM Power. We're an AIM-listed company based in Sheffield of around 65 staff, and we design, manufacture and sell hydrogen generation equipment based on PEM electrolysis. So I'm going to try and talk a little bit about hydrogen infrastructure, and to do that I'm going to quickly summarise a couple of our product platforms that I feel are relevant to the discussion, and then talk about two application or market areas, in particular clean fuel and energy storage. And before that I'll give a quick snapshot of the technology and a few of the recent highlights. So to begin, just a few notes for the last period for us. We've just come out of a small fundraising activity which gave us $5.5 million. As part of that, we received $1 million from investment from the Carbon Trust towards development of our core membrane technology for application in automotive fuel cells. We've secured $4 million of new grant money, of which we are leading a consortium of companies that together that has received $2.4 million from the TSB for a project on Eco Island, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail shortly. We're working with Scottish and Southern, National Grid and Shell on the area of hydrogen injection into the natural gas network, which is something I'll speak about as well. And just recently we've established our first project with a German utility. Our products sales are building steadily. We've had CE marked units for about 18 months now, and we are in tandem developing the sales channels in the UK, Germany and the US. So a quick piece on the technology. Our core technology lies within the bit of equipment we call the stack, and that's really the engine room of an electrolyzer. It's the bit that you put the power and the water into, and it gives you hydrogen and oxygen gases. But we've spent a long time developing the technology that's in that particular piece of equipment. But as we've gone into the product development cycle, we've had to engage with and develop the skills to tackle all of the other systems that need to sit around the stack to turn it into a full product. So things like power conversion, water systems, gas handling, communications and control and so on. And doing all of that against a background of product compliance. So we've spent some time trying to make sure that we've got that core piece of the equation right, and we have developed a few new platforms along the way. So focusing in on the stack again, just to give you a view of our journey, our first stack platform was capable of generating just less than 0.5 kilogram of hydrogen a day, and we've steadily built on that as the years have gone by up to 25 kilograms a day, which is where we're at now. So that's quite a significant challenge in terms of the scale up, but it's been led by demand from the market. So carrying that forward into products, that gives an even broader range in terms of generation capacity. The biggest one being the image on the bottom right there, which is a 20-foot ISO container capable of generating 400 kilograms of hydrogen a day, and that represents 1 megawatt of electrical load. So that scale-up activity in 3 years represents, I think, 3 orders of magnitude in terms of scale. Very briefly on the products, I'm going to skip over most of them and just talk about H-Fuel and H-Gas. H-Fuel is our workhorse platform. It's capable of generating between 5 and 100 kilograms a day. It's CE marked, and we've got a couple of different deployment scenarios. The image on the left is a self-contained stack with its own incorporated balance of plant. So it's an isolated generation module, and that is a CE marked product in its own right. The image in the middle is a refueling station that we've recently commissioned at the University of Nottingham, and that is designed as a chassis that can take a number of those generation modules. And that approach of having an expandable platform is, we find from our feedback, very attractive to some new entrants into this area who aren't always 100% sure exactly what sort of equipment they need. The image on the right shows a slightly different arrangement that's designed to pack as many stacks in there as possible, and that's the route to achieve 100 kilograms a day, and that's the environment that we'll be using on the Eco Island project, which I'll refer to in a minute. So H-gas is a larger system. That uses the 25 kilogram a day stack. A couple of things that are maybe worth pointing out about that platform is that the stack self-generates to 80 bar pressure. And that's quite important because it means for a variety of applications where most applications require hydrogen at a high pressure. And in many of those applications, we've eliminated the need for a separate mechanical compressor. So that's very good for your capital cost, and it's also good for your operational costs. The other thing about it is that it's got a very fast response time, and that means that it can be brought on and switched off very, very quickly within a second, and that's important for some of the applications. And it's modular at both the stack level, how many stacks are in a container, and also at the container level, how many containers you can put side by side. A quick piece on the cost of hydrogen that comes out of these bits of equipment. There's kind of a lot to get across in one graph, so I'm going to do as quick a job as I can. But what this graph shows is the cost of the hydrogen that you'd produced with respect to utilization factor. It represents a 100 kilogram a day generation unit based on the selling price today. So it's not a forward-looking statement about if you order 100 or 1,000. This is a one-off price, and it's based on a 10-year amortization period. What it shows is that the blue line is the operational cost together with the amortized capital, and the red line is the operational cost once you've amortized that capital. For reference and context, there's the EU target for hydrogen price in 2015, which comes out of one of the McKinsey analyses, and the cost per mile equivalent of diesel based on UK forecourt prices today. That says that based on these assumptions, if you operate more than 50% of the time, you're in the right sort of place. So application areas, I'll say a little bit about clean fuel first. There are 4 different areas that we're targeting: individual vehicle refueling, depot refueling, island systems, and wider scale infrastructure rollout and mobility. And I'll touch on these very briefly. So individual vehicle refueling, an activity that captures that concept is what we're doing with Boeing. We've got a contract from them to design and supply a electrolyzer product that is capable of working off-grid and is highly transportable. So it's a mini container that at a moment's notice could be driven somewhere, put down, attached to some fold-out solar panels and generate hydrogen. And that hydrogen is used to fuel one of their UAVs, an unmanned aerial vehicle. So it's going to be ATEX and CE compliant, and all of the stuff that goes along with that. But one of the things that we see is that UAVs, the UAV market is growing very rapidly for civilian applications, in particular looking at surveying land and assets, doing all the sorts of things that you might otherwise charter a helicopter to do. Materials handling is another, which I think is a rapidly growing early adoption market. There's been a lot of fuel cells used in North America for this application, but not so much in Europe. And we did the first trial of this kind in the UK with Marks and Spencers and Wincanton. And the backdrop to this is that distribution warehouses that have foods and perishable goods in them can't have vehicles running around that produce emissions. So that means you're either using batteries or fuel cells. The thing about a fuel cell is that you can refuel it, recharge it in less than 2 minutes, whereas it takes several hours to recharge the battery. And so there are some operational benefits that can be got from that for that particular thing. In addition to that, a fuel cell gives you 100% power across the whole shift, whereas a battery tends to sort of slow down a little bit towards the end of the shift. And that means, again, there's a productivity benefit. And during the trial, it was quite interesting to see at the start of a shift, there was a bit of a race in the morning. So the guys who were driving these things all made a beeline for the fuel cell powered forklifts because they all went faster and stayed faster for the full day. So that was a good bit of direct feedback. One of the things about that trial is that we developed a relationship with a company called Infinitium that supplied the fuel cell, which is a direct replacement for the battery module. And we now have a European exclusive import distribution for that fuel cell. One of the things I believe that's held this market back in Europe is the lack of a CE mark. Things can go a lot faster in the US because you don't need a CE mark. There's a lot of compliance work to do domestically, and we're anticipating getting that CE mark under our belt before the end of this year. So wider infrastructure deployment, it's been referred to already. There are a number of national schemes looking at the rollout of both hydrogen vehicles and the infrastructure to support them. Germany led the way, starting in 2009, South Korea as well, activities in Japan, and the UK has now got its own programme. And this slide is really to say that we're not alone. There are a number of these things happening. One of the important things I feel about this UK initiative is that it combines three of the key government departments together into a kind of single entity that you can interact with. And that's an important thing because hydrogen and mobility cuts across a lot of different government departments, and that sometimes can be a barrier to get a kind of a clear policy on the whole position. I think there's been a running joke for some time about when fuel cell vehicles will arrive, and I think it's clear now. I think everybody accepts that they are now arriving, and the key date for most of these companies is 2015. There are a few that are pushing ahead and looking to deliver a little bit earlier. Honda and Toyota recently announced that they are going to meet their 2015 target. Daimler are going a year early, and Hyundai are starting earlier than that. And I think the appetite of the car companies within these mobility initiatives is a significant driving force and is pushing this forward very quickly. They want to deploy them somewhere. They're only going to go where there's hydrogen infrastructure. Eco Island is a project that is looking at putting an energy storage system as part of a smart grid on the Isle of Wight, and as part of that we'll be putting down a 100 kilogram a day refueler and introducing 20 hydrogen vehicles. Those vehicles will be a blend of internal combustion engines and fuel cells. And I think importantly about this project, it brings together some very extensive expertise from SSE as the utility company, Toshiba with their control system and integration. IBM do all of the billing and communications associated with charging for hydrogen when it's dispensed, and Cable and Wireless are managing all of the communications and telemetry between various bits of plant, including the vehicles. Toyota and Hyundai are involved also. Energy storage, I know I've not got a lot of time, and apologies for speaking very quickly. There are a number of applications in this area, but I think there's only time to talk about one of them, and I've picked gas injection. And what this represents is it's a way of dealing with some of the excess wind energy, renewable energy that we often create and can't use. So one option is to grab that energy, turn it into hydrogen, and then inject it into the natural gas network. And what that does is essentially avoid curtailment of wind energy that you could have had. It helps to decarbonise any application that is using natural gas, and it doesn't rely on any other associated technologies. So a few controversial numbers at the start, just to try and put some monetary value on it. This table shows the curtailment payments, or the constraint payments that have been made during 2011. And so this is situations where there's wind capacity, but the electricity network just hasn't got any spare room to take it. So what it does is it sends a message to the wind farm and says, sorry, I can't take that power. And that in the UK triggers a payment. And while if you tot all that up, it comes to nearly 16 million pounds, that sounds like a lot of money. It only represents 0.4% of the wind power that was generated during that period. Now, one of the things there is that we're not yet at what we've come to know as the pain threshold. When you deploy more and more renewables, you expose yourself more and more to the mismatch in supply and demand of energy. And there's a threshold of around 20% by capacity or 8% by energy, where your renewable energy starts to bite into your base load. And at that point, curtailment becomes a bigger and bigger problem. Now, we know this because other countries have got there before us, and we can see what's happening there. The forecast for the UK, depending on seasons and all sorts of different things, is that we'll get to that threshold between 2013 and 2015. So it's not far away. I think in the last 24 hours, or last 48 hours, we got over 7% generation from wind. So Germany is an example of a territory where this is already happening, and one of the solutions to that particular dilemma is gas grid injection. So instead of turning down the wind, go through an electrolyser, turn it into hydrogen, and introduce that into the gas grid. So I've talked a little bit about a product platform that is able to address that from a technical point of view. We're doing a project, again with support of the TSB, looking at what the technical, compliance and business case challenges are for making all of that work. And we've got a good collaboration, and that we have got Gas Tech, part of the Kiwa Group, who are essentially a notified body for all things gas related. The Scottish Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association, they're important because Scotland is the area where we've got most of the wind generation and the curtailment problems exist. Logan Energy is the installation partner, SSE is a utility who faces this particular problem, and National Grid and Shell, who are very eager to understand how this can be deployed. So it's important when tackling issues like this that you have the right people in the group so that you can understand everyone's point of view and make sure that you're developing a solution that does actually satisfy the existing problem. This slide is really just to show this isn't a new thing, it's not something that's just been invented. It is happening already. The dark blue dots there show hydrogen to power to gas sites in Germany. As a summary, I know that was very quick, apologies for that. We believe that we're developing 5 solid pipelines to commercial pipelines. The first is UAV refueling, growing very rapidly, and we're now engaging with 3 of the top 5 aerospace companies. We've sold equipment to Boeing and to EADS. Material handling, early adoption market, we're dealing with 6 of the 10 top UK retailers, and we see that as a very, very quick moving area. Hydrogen mobility and the refueling that we're putting down on Eco Island is an important nucleus, I feel, to bring a lot of these things together in the same place to allow enough infrastructure for things to happen. In Germany, we are working with 2 federal states and 2 utility companies. As we've seen, Germany is a territory where things are happening quite quickly. And gas grid injection, we are working with National Grid to make sure that the both technically and economically the proposition stacks up. Thank you very much for your time. I feel that we're reaching a critical point, and we're now at the stage where we have I think a good offering, and we're getting strong customer engagement, and it's the time to deliver. Watch this space. Thank you very much.